Hi there, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to be covering the process and proper technique in order to cut out nameplates using your Nano or Eco Engraver. So first of all, we're going to go back to our file that we have on our desktop, and I called mine the engraving master file. Just as a review, to protect this file, we had right click on it, and then we hit properties and showing that it's read-only. I like to start all of my new projects using this file. So we'll open that up. Okay, now that it's open, what we're going to want to do is select this F with a little tiny icon next to it. And that's our text tool here. So we're going to click it anywhere, and it's going to apply the default value in here, which is just text. So when we're creating a nameplate, some of the key things that we want to keep in mind is the contact between each one of these. So it's going to be very critical to use a block style font. So for example, we wouldn't want to use something like this, right? So a script is not going to be very good because it's very thin and it doesn't connect well to one another. Secondly, what I want to keep track of is having everything in either bold and all caps. So let's go back. I was using Franklin Gothic. And you can choose how heavy you want to go. Let's do this demi condensed. I mean, I don't think it really matters. And then I'll hit apply. So now that we have our text selected, or our font rather, just below that we have these three icons. And this is going to help us space these texts together in a way that's going to help them connect. Now, in some cases, on certain names, we're not going to be as easy to connect to one another. Most recently, I helped a client do this one, Paxson. So let's hit OK. And so you can see that the P is not touching and the O is almost being buried into the N. So what I like to do is, first of all, I like to center my piece. So if I select the arrow tool, this icon will appear, which is put to origin. So that's going to put my work into the center of the work environment. And then we're going to go into zoom all, which is going to zoom into everything that we've selected, or all of our work. In this case, it's only one. And then what I like to do to help separate all of these so we don't have to do a layer for P, a layer for A, a layer for X, and so on, we can actually separate these a lot easier. So if I get a shape tool, either a square, circle, whichever, and I'm just going to make one. And you can see that rectangular now shows up in our object list. If I select both of these together and hit this button, which is combine, it's going to combine these two together. Now you can see something happened to our P, our A, and so on. And so it transformed them from a text into shapes. And so they're going to behave differently now. So in order to now work with these separately, we're going to go to the button just to the right of that, which is uncombine. And now on the objects list, you can see that each one of these is now separated into its own layer, including the O here. So first off, we'll want to delete that here. So hit delete. And then we can, for ease, we can select, so holding shift, I'm going to click on both of those lines and then combine them. Grab this A, grab the outer line, and combine that. This O, same thing, holding shift and first clicking on both of those lines, we're going to combine those. What this does is it helps us navigate these letters together without making mistakes. Because if I didn't, let's say let's uncombine this really fast, and I was like, oh, I want to move this O over. Well, you can see that I've accidentally misaligned the center of that O. But if they're combined together, so when I want to move them, then they move together. And that's where the benefit lies. Now, as we're individually moving these letters together, we can say these are good, so I can select both of them in the same way, holding shift and selecting both objects, then we can move them together. So here's something where if I'm using the arrows left and right, let's say that's way too much movement because I don't like how it's combining down here, we can come over to this position area just below our objects list, and then we can specifically, in millimeters, move this around, as well as if we need this whole name a certain size, we can say select all of them and say I want this to be exactly we'll say 40 millimeters across, and my apologies, beforehand we want to make sure that this lock is in place, because this, if it's not, then when we change this number, then it's only going to change the X, so we can stretch this out really wide. But if we have it locked, you can see that it will dynamically change the number below it at the same time. So we're going to make that 40, hit apply, and you can see that it's scaled. So just to showcase what was going on, let's say I didn't have this checked, hit apply, I can scrunch it up. And maybe in a style choice, maybe you want that, or you want it exactly a certain height. But in this case, we're going to maintain the aspect ratio. So zooming out just a little bit so we can see what we're working with. I like how this looks, but I want this corner of the A to match up with that corner. So I'm going to say I want this negative 7.5 instead of negative 7.6. That's the opposite direction, so that's all my bad. So we'll do 7.8. And then I can zoom in to see how close I was. I'm pretty close. So let's do 7.9. Beautiful. I like that. So that's something that I'm going to be picky on, and so that's what I chose to do. Next, you can see that I would like to have more material combined to one another, so I have a little bit of strength. There's a couple of things that you can do. You can either stretch this over, or what we can do is just create a rectangle. Just create a small rectangle and then move that up so it's nice and flush. Right? And we can stretch this down if needed. So that way this is less likely to break. So every one of these intersections is going to be combined into one shape. Next, I'm going to move this O over just a little bit. It looks like I'm going to have to custom drag it. That's good. And that's fine right there. So again, all that's combined. Let's say we don't want this bar, or it's not joining the way I want it to. I can hit this button here, which is just below our pick tool, so we can edit node. And so if I click on this X, I can actually move this exact line to be whatever I want. So maybe I want to modify this X a little bit to match more of the style that I want, where I want to move these down. I can also select two of them at the same time and move them together. So that's up to you. In this case, I think it's going to look better if I just have a little bar here. So now that we got to this point, what I like to do is I like to save this just in case the client wants something changed after we preview it. So I'm going to say save as. I'm going to say Paxson. And we can create a folder by right-clicking, new, and folder, and we'll say Nameplates. And so if we ever have a client in the future named Paxson, we can say, oh, here's my Paxson nameplate. And we can make adjustments. Now, the reason why I specifically save it at this location is once we take on these next steps and the client wants a different size, it's really hard to come back to this location. And so what we want to do is grab this circle and then just put it anywhere. And let's say I want a very specific size. So again, we're going to make sure that this is locked. And we're going to make this, we'll say 4 millimeters as our outer diameter. Perfect. And so now I can use this pick tool and drag it over to be next to our P in the traditional way. Now, here's something important to note, and maybe it'd be helpful to write this down. So these numbers will help us line up the inner circle so that we can cut that hole open for our nameplate. So let's do, we'll say -20 as a flat number. That's easy to remember. And we'll do 5.25. That's an easy number to remember as well. Okay. Now, having those numbers is very helpful because what we can do is we can take this, we can hold Control and then hit C for copy, and then Control V as in Victor to paste. And as we move this new object, you can see these values change. And so I can put this over here, and once I line it up, I'm like, oh yeah, how high is this? 5.25. So we can take the Y value of this and make sure that this second circle, when we change this Y, we can make sure that vertically it is identical to the other side, so it will lay flat. So that can be incredibly nice. As far as left and right, we can make minor adjustments as needed as well. Let's say we want this to be 22 just to, again, make it easy flat numbers, so when we incorporate the center cutout circle. Perfect. At this point, we're in a good space. So in order to combine all of these together, I like to highlight all of them, and then we're going to modify this object. So we're going to go up to modify, and we're going to do plastic. And I like to think about plastic surgery to help myself remember. Once I hit plastic, this first option is what we're going to want to use. I want to say weld. And you'll notice that when I hit that, there's a little addition to my icon that matches the same shape. What we're going to want to do is touch somewhere on the outer line. And once I do that, you'll see that it's all combined together into one shape. So all the intersecting lines are now gone. And you'll see that it's now combined into a single object here. That looks amazing. So the next thing we want to do is start adding these circles here. So we can cut those out. So again, we can just make a basic circle. Let's say we want this to be 2 millimeters in outer diameter. And I believe this was -20 and 5.25. When I hit apply, that's going to be in the dead center of where this outer circle was. That's why we're remembering where those were. So again, we can select this, Control C for copy, Control V to paste that in. And then while this is selected, we can go 5.25, and I don't recall what this one was. Maybe it's 22. That's pretty close. It might have been 23, but if we have them written down, then we can reference those. But now at this point, visually, it is exactly what we need in order to engrave or to cut this out. Everything that's in this list will be engraved or cut in the order that it's listed in. So we don't want to cut out this name first because we need to have these cut out first, these circles of our eyelets. So what I do is I right click on the object that needs to be cut out last, and I say move to bottom. So now you'll cut that one out first, and then that one, and then it will do this one. One other thing to consider, just in case, is what about this P and this A? We want those cut out first, and this part of the X, and this part, and so on. So to ensure that, we can uncombine this and just verify. So let's click on this. Okay, so that's near the top. That's at the top, okay. That's near the top. That's near the bottom. Since we only have one outline, we can do it this way, or we can just say outline is the outermost outline at the very bottom. And if it is, then that's exactly what we want. So we can go back to here, recombine that, just so that if we need to move this around, we can. And then let's go over to our laser, and then we can verify if this is the correct size for the client. All right, so now that we're at our laser engraver, what I like to do is, if I have some stock, is I like loosening up all 4 of these and then sliding this in. So when they're loose, we can actually go underneath where they're clamped. So I've done quite a few demos on this, so forgive the cutouts, but this could be helpful if you have some scrap and want to use it. So I like to stretch this XYZ clamp out accordingly, but not all the way max, and you'll see why in just a second. So I want to tighten these now up, so this is applying force downward onto our pieces here. Once this is tight, then we can stretch that out, and it makes it very taut. If I don't have that, you can see there's a lot of flex. And this is particularly helpful if there's heat generation during the engraving process. So before we start identifying if our design is correct spatially, we want to validate that these 2 lasers are married in one place. And you can see they're separated there. So going to our top knob, we can spin that to raise or lower the laser head in order to bring those 2 lasers into one space. So let me zoom that in so we can see a little bit better. So again, we can raise or lower it in order to see those together. And in order to see both of these lasers, we need to have the 1 and 2 buttons on the right hand side of the machine lit up and depressed in order to illuminate these. Otherwise, they won't be showing up at all. So with both of them illuminated, we're going to be in good shape. So going back to our PC, we can hit F1, or at the very bottom where it says red. And red is going to show our design on our exact piece. So you can see exactly how big it is in real space before we've committed to it. Let's say that we like that. Then we can hit escape. What I like to do then is select my whole design, and then we can select the cutting passes. So there's a couple of ways that we can do it. Looking at your manual, there's a couple of things that we can do to cut on certain thicknesses. But if we don't know, then we can combine these together, and they're going to stay in the same order in which they were before they were combined. And this just helps us organize our layers a little better. But I can say we're going to do cut top, and while this is selected, and only this, we're going to right click and say applied pick object. Now something happens, this changes color, and that color is going to correspond with the pen or engraving setting that it's corresponding with. So we have a top, middle, and bottom. And so the main thing that I would consider is the amount of loop count. So how many times is it going to run this line before it moves on or stops? So the default is 10, so we'll leave that there for now. I'm going to actually copy this 2 more times, and selecting one at a time, I'm actually going to put this into the center and move all of them into the center so they look like one piece. And so selecting the second one, I'm going to, and only the second one in this list, I'm now going to apply that one to the middle. And on the bottom, I'm going to lastly apply the bottom setting. Let's see if helps if I have it selected. There we go. So now, just as a visual, I can move this. You can see that this is blue and this is that brown color, which is our middle. So we'll put that there. So now it will do 10 passes of the top, 10 passes of the middle, and then 10 passes of the bottom. And you'll come to find, if you use the same stock, that you might be able to change the loop count so that one run of this program will cut through your material. So to showcase this, I'm going to go back to my workspace on the laser engraver, and we're going to look at it and see if it moved at all and if we have to make any minor adjustments. So that looks well and good. Oh, it looks like I need to stop that and then hit mark. My apologies. And so now we're seeing that it's cutting out that circle on either side first. So you can see that the object list is important to review, because I don't think I moved them around, and so it's doing the outer line first. So I might have to separate my layers, and I can do that now by stopping the engraving, uncombine it, and then selecting the outer line and then moving that to the bottom, and then recombining it. And then same thing here. I can uncombine that, find my outer line, move that to the bottom, and since we have a combined part already, we can just move to previous so that they're all in line. Hold Shift, click to all of them, and then we can recombine them. And then lastly, uncombine that, find our guy there. We're going to move to the bottom and then move up to previous. Move up to previous again. Hold Shift, select all of those again, and recombine. So if we want to keep track of what these are called, I believe that we can rename them. So we can say top, middle, and we're just double clicking on that space. We'll say that way we can keep track of each one using names. So going back, we're going to hit F2 to start the process again. And let's say the combining of the layers forces it to be on the outer side. Then what we can do is just keep it uncombined the whole time. So I believe it was this one. So I can drag and move it to the bottom of that list. Same thing, drag to the bottom of that list, uncombine, drag to the very bottom of the list. And I want to the bottom of each separate layer. And so it might be valuable to, instead of combining it, then to, let's say this is a group, we can just say group instead. All right, so let's run that again. And now it's doing it in the correct order. So now it's going to be doing the A, the P, the little space between the X's, and the O. And so I'll be speeding this up for visual sake. So what I like to do once it's finished is I like to grab something stiff. I just have a little rod here. So what I want to do is just apply a little bit of pressure. I can start feeling it breaking free. So with a little bit more pressure, I can get that released. Now all I needed to do is just put this on a quick polishing wheel just to remove the oxide layer, and this is ready to be put on a client. For more videos, please check us out on our YouTube channel as we are recording videos more and more on different applications on how to use your Nano and Eco Engraver.